So we'll open the Scituate Board of Health meeting. One change on this, it says Scituate Town Hall, I have to change that to the GAR Hall on the agenda. Oh, this is January 12th, I'm not looking at it.
Oh, did he have the old one?
I got it wrong. There we go, I'm fine.
I thought I changed those things.
I had an old one. Oops.
Okay, it's changed magically.
No, we're good. Scituate Board of Health meeting, GAR Hall, Thursday, February 12th, 2015. Open the meeting and a motion to accept the agenda.
Make a motion to open the meeting and accept the agenda.
All those in favor? Aye. Public hearing, 5 Williamsburg Lane.
They knew it was our problem.
Yes, they did.
Oh, great.
I'll open up here so we take a look. Good evening. My name is Greg Morris, I'm a registered engineer at Morris Engineering. I spoke at the last Board of Health meeting, probably in December now, actually, at this point. This is regarding a septic system design in 5 Williamsburg Lane. My clients are Kenton Bongerzone, who is the property owner. We're in front of you because we're seeking a variance for the head of 5. The last meeting, I walked through the variance requirements and the standard of review that are outlined in Title 5. One of those standards was that we meet with the water supplier for the town. We have done that. We have met with the Water Resource Company, and we're coming back to you with the plan. I submitted revised plans just now. The revised plans essentially address the comments that were brought up from the engineering division. They're not substantive changes to the design, but the changes that were made, I'll point them out. Our floor plan, we're proposing a 3-bedroom house. We've labeled our floor plan with 3 bedrooms. They asked that we label the invert on a head wall, and we have added that invert location. One of our test pits, we had mislabeled the C horizon as a B horizon. We have made that text correct. They added a second benchmark. We always have one benchmark. We've added a second benchmark to the plan. The remainder of his comments have to do with the request that we have in front of you for the variance. The variance, let's discuss that for a moment. I submitted a letter dated November 14th, outlining the requirements and how we believe that this project complies.
How you doing, folks? Just for you guys know, so we opened the meeting at 7 and we're discussing 5 for the middle of that. Thank you.
So to kind of outline the project, we weren't here when we presented this originally. The property line here is shown in bold. The lot itself is 21,461 square feet. It is entirely upland area. There is no floodplain on the property. We have a country way on the side of the plan. We have Williamsburg Lane and the bottom. We propose a 10-bedroom access off of Williamsburg Lane. We provided a septic system that, after soil testing results witnessed by the town, we provided a system known as a micro-fast denitrification tank, a distribution box, and 2 gravity-fed leaching trenches. The constraint on the site is that at the back of the site here, there exists a tributary to the town's water supply. Title 5 has a setback to tributaries. They have a setback of 200 feet to septic components. This property is unique. This property is unique in the fact that this lot was created in 1955. It complies with all respects of zoning. It complies with frontage. It complies with upland area. In 1970, the property owner granted an easement to the town. That easement runs along this side lot line, and that easement has a pipe within it. The discharge for that pipe is what creates this tributary. The pipe is connected to the catch basins in Country Way. It's not connected to any wetland up gradient of the site. It's taking street water. The street water is the tributary. In 1987, the town enacted its water resource protection bylaw. That bylaw has a 150-foot setback requirement, a no-disturb setback to any tributaries. The client has filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals seeking relief from that 150-foot setback. The claim is that there is no way on this site to comply with the 150-foot setback of the town. That's going before the zoning board at their meeting next week. The septic plan that we submitted.
Say that again, what's the zoning board going to
They
decide?
haven't gone to the zoning board.
No, but,
So the zoning in the town of Scituate
Yep.
requires that from a tributary there be a 150-foot no-disturb buffer zone, okay? That 150-foot buffer zone is measured from this point and encompasses the entire lot, okay? We've requested a variance from the zoning board to allow construction up to 50 feet away from the tributary. Okay. We feel that we have a unique case, again, due to the circumstances where the lot was created prior to enactment of that 150-foot buffer. If the property owner was required to comply with that buffer, it would deprive them of all substantial use of the lot. It would not be a developable lot in any means. And we feel that he's provided equal environmental protection to offset the disturbance in the 150-foot buffer. And so the zoning board will be discussing that aspect of the site next week. What we're here for, though, is the septic system component of the request. The septic system component is clear. It's a Title V variance, and Title V outlines in Section 15.410 the requirements. I outlined them to you in my letter dated November 14th, and I'd like to go through them one by one. Again, the variance we're requesting is with regards to the location of the septic system, the requirement being that it be 200 feet from the tributary. We have it proposed at a minimum distance of 110 feet from the tributary.
110, says 100.
100's to the reserve, 110 is to the proposed septic system.
Okay. It's just sticking itself.
Yes. So Title V, Section 15.410, we can read this through here. It's the standard of review for a variance. It says, local approving authorities may vary the application of any provisions of 310 CMR 15 with respect to any particular case, except those listed in 310 CMR 15.415. This is not one of those. Variances for increased flow to existing systems shall be governed by the provisions of 310 CMR 15.414. This is not an existing system. Variances from schools shall be governed by the provisions of 15.416. This is not a school. So we fall into the last category. Variance shall be granted only when, in the opinion of the approving authority, two conditions have to be met. The person requesting a variance has established that enforcement of the provision of 310 CMR 15 from which a variance is sought would be manifestly unjust, considering all of the relevant facts and circumstances to the individual case. And secondly, the person requesting a variance has established that a level of environmental protection that is at least equivalent to that provided under 310 CMR 15 can be achieved without strict compliance to the provision of 310 CMR 15 from which a variance is sought. And so I'd like to go through both of these individually. The first one showing that denial of the variance would be considered manifestly unjust. We feel we have a case for that because the proposed use of this lot is a single-family home. It's an allowed use in this zoning district. The lot complies with all respects to zoning for the lot as far as frontage and land area. It was created as a buildable lot. It was laid out on a subdivision plan prior to the water resource protection bylaw that was put in place. And with denial of the variance, it would deny the applicant putting any type of septic system on this property in any of the locations. It certainly could not be achieved, the 200-foot radius on this site. Therefore, it would render the lot completely unbuildable and useless. We would consider that manifestly unjust.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So what year was it deemed to be part of the subdivision and thus a buildable lot?
That was
Relative-
1955.
Can you briefly provide me?
1987.
And the zoning bylaw was 59, right? Was-
I don't know what exact year for the zoning bylaw, but the zoning bylaw that has to do with the 150-foot buffer was 1987.
Okay.
Correct. And I would point out the only reason there's a tributary on this site is because the applicant, for consideration of $1, granted to the town this easement, which allowed the town to discharge its drainage at the back of the property here.
What
in
did the drainage do
1970.
before 1970?
Probably just ran off as overland flow, is my guess. And when it's overland flow, there is no setback to it. It's when it physically gets excavated out and now becomes in a channel, that's when its status technically becomes a tributary. And back in 1970, when the easement was granted, there were no setbacks at that point. It wasn't until 1987 that the setback came into place.
Is there any fill on this lot?
There has been some fill placed on the lot. We did notice it in one of the test pits, test pit A. Certainly when Williamsburg Lane was built, there was probably some fill placed along the front of the lot. That's where we noticed it in test pit A.
Yeah, I walked this lot, I think right after the other meeting, it looked like this whole area was filled. My own opinion. I didn't look at the soils though. Just seemed very peculiar to me, the way it was, the gradient went.
Yeah, it certainly slopes. This is the lowest point of the lot, and it continues sloping this way. You know, yeah, there certainly was a level area up here. I don't know if that, I mean, in one of the test pits, it certainly was fill. The other ones all show that they comply with the minimum of a 4 foot of naturally occurring material. That was witnessed by Ralph.
And this is, what year, since what year has the family owned it?
1955. It's been in the same family
Can I ask you a question?
since it was created.
The lot next to it is being built now, Dougie Sharon's lot. Does that abut to the tributary too?
Yes, it does, and all of the houses on that comply with the 150-foot setback, because those are new lots. We designed them to comply with that.
That's kind of the thing that sticks in my
This
mind
is
is,
a tight lot.
well, it's a tight lot, but the thing the more I ponder it is, the subdivision's been here since 1955. Granted, an easement went in 1970. The water resource protection went in 1987, and here we are at 2015, respectively. Maybe you started this in 2014. There's quite a few gaps there. And it's just, that's a long time, 87, 97, 2007, that's 20 years. Right?
I mean,
What's your point though?
I mean, I think that lends credence to the
Point
fact-
being is,
to-
if you were going to develop, knowing laws are changing that would prohibit the development of this law,
But people's circumstances change. I mean, for whatever reason, they've decided to do it now. I
We-
don't think that.
Yeah, and this one here is unique. I'd remind you that back in, I believe it was 2012, we came before, we submitted a septic plan on this lot because we didn't think that was a tributary. It was originally delineated as a wetland resource area.
Yeah, it's new evidence that comes
So it's
forward.
new evidence all of a sudden. So we never thought there was a tributary. We never thought it was an unbuildable lot for any reason.
Water resource met on this
Tuesday.
Tuesday. So I think we have a report here. I don't know if either one of you had looked at it.
No, I've read it, yeah.
So
I mean, I've read all the
I've not read
correspondence.
anything from John Clarkson.
Okay.
This is just a summary of my notes,
Okay.
and my interpretation of the meeting as we discussed discussed. You're welcome to look at my copy.
Just take a quick peek.
I did, yeah, and again, I hold some weight to the fact that this lot has sat, and for whatever reason, somebody did do it something, and yeah, it was done, I guess, as you say, in 2012, but there's still quite a gap there, and we have another board within town that has looked at it through water protection, which is in the interest of every resident in this town, and I think it's a 2-to-1 vote there against the development of this lot.
Which I was a little surprised at, that it was 2-to-1. I mean, I wasn't, there was obviously some concerns from one of the members that they didn't have a concern. I mean, it was evident that they didn't have a concern. It wasn't 5-0, it wasn't 4-1, it was 2-to-1, and which, it means it's close, and it's a debatable, they certainly must have debated it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think as it reads, that, one of the members had said that these laws were in place to protect the water, and 2 of them agreed to that, as the Board of Health putting everything together, you start granting variances, you could open up a Pandora's box for other lots, and I gotta,
So
it just doesn't add up to me. It doesn't. I understand you've designed a system, denitrification and other things, but it's still adding something onto the site, and this is what the Water Resource is looking at. You're adding something that's not there today. If this was built back in 1956, we might be here doing a repair. It wouldn't even be an issue. Variances would be granted like that. I would have no problem with it. The problem is that it waited so long. And it seemed, I don't know, if other lots were built.
Sure. I think the points that you bring up are certainly all valid points, and I think the majority of the conversation with the Water Resource Committee really focused on the disturbance within the 150-foot buffer. We asked them specific questions to weigh in on the septic system. They really did not discuss the septic system in depth, okay? The points you bring up, I think they're valid. I think they're valid for discussion and argument. I don't think that's your fight personally to make. I think that's the Zoning Board of Appeals with the variance that we've asked for with the 150-foot buffer. I think we need to focus on the septic issue alone with this application, because that's all we've asked of you, is for the septic issue alone.
I understand where you're going, but I have to politely disagree, because right here it says Title V, and that is clearly under Board of Health rule and guidance. So.
No, which it is.
Exactly.
No, I understand where Greg's going with this.
I do, but when I see Title V right there,
I think there are 2 issues, and I've read all the correspondence on this. I think there are 2 issues. There is a zoning issue, which is not our purview, and then it is, they're looking for a variance from the Title V requirements. Do we feel that it suffices with the nitrogen system that is here, and the way that tributary was created in the first place? Are we satisfied that it meets that hardship case, and it meets the,
It's a serious variance though, Michael. I mean, it's half of what it should be. Meaning it's 200 feet to 100 feet. That's a serious variance. I mean, a variance is a variance, but you're not talking 10 or 15 feet. You're talking half of the distance where it should be. Those footage were set there for a reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And especially
Because somebody way back when did the test,
Yeah.
did whatever.
I just do have, I put a lot of weight in the fact that it was man-made, and it was granted by the, and it wasn't, this isn't a case where somebody bought this lot for $1,000 last year and is trying to flip it.
Right.
This has been in the family a couple generations, and it was a man-made tributary that they granted the town an easement. I place a lot of weight on that, because if they had built it, we wouldn't, what Russell said, we wouldn't be talking about
So
a
you're saying
variance.
they shouldn't be punished for that because
I
they were
absolutely-
generous 50 years ago or 40 years ago and gave the town an easement and it was man-made.
Correct.
And we can't punish them for that because of circumstances that have happened since. But then Russell also says, well, geez, that easement, what year was that easement granted?
1970.
70. So what is that, 45 years ago? Between now and 45 years ago, nothing has happened. so I see a case for both sides.
Well, I mean, you had the case with the train, before the train stopped running in 1959, right? And people built, you know, I mean, then they
Well, that's because the population of Scituate increased.
you know, I think there is a hardship case. And I don't think it's a precedent setting, because I don't think you're gonna have a lot of, I think, you know, somebody's not gonna you can't just all of a sudden have a similar situation next door unless was an easement granted in 1970, a couple generation owned property.
I think, no one will maybe never know unless you really dug deep of why that easement went in. That easement may have created this lot, you know, it may have dried it up as a wetland, you don't know. It may have been something to do with the subdivision further back here for granting that subdivision. That $1 may have attributed to something.
Well, we have a copy of the easement.
Down the other end.
The subdivision was
There's
approved
no
in
mystery.
1955, the easement didn't go until
But
1970.
70, yeah.
There's no mystery on the easement.
Yeah.
We have a copy of it. Have
Let
you
me,
read the easement?
I would add, type,
I mean, he gave us a copy of the easement with the original.
yes,
Yeah.
Title 5 actually envisions this exact variance being approved, and they have language for new construction sites where the local approving authority is requesting this. It's under section 310 CMR 15.4.11.5, and it says that you are allowed to waive it from the 200 feet down to a minimum of 100. So Title V and DEP basically are saying, we envision this variance coming before you, if the burden of proof is met here, that it can be waived down to 100 feet. And that's what we've asked for.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you satisfied? We really haven't talked about the system itself. We're really talking about the
location.
The location.
Right.
And I think, let's talk about the system itself. I mean, does this reduce the, what do you think about the system?
Well, like I say, they were witnessed by Ralph Cole. Mr. Morse is a licensed soil evaluator. My gut tells me there's more fill out here, but I can't argue two licenses. There is fill shown on test pit A, which is right in the middle of the system. And I just look out there and it just, to me, that whole thing looks like fill. And, you know, again, I trust your license. That's what you do. It's just my eyeball. I've been around. And so that's a minor problem with me. And that's just my own thought. But as far as the system, again, you're adding a septic system. It's close with the variance. Yeah, the system works. That's where it is.
Discuss the system, the fast system that you do have proposed here, as opposed to a traditional system. I mean, you know, let's just update that thought process a little bit.
So the system itself, basically, it's starting at the septic tank. Rather than having a traditional septic tank, it has a fast system. A fast system is a tank that has an initial settling zone to settle out your scum and your sludge, and then it has a second compartment. And in that second compartment, there's fixed media, almost like an egg crate substance that's made out of plastic. And up at the surface of the ground is a blower, and that blower is sucking air in, and it's pumping it through the media in the tank. What that does is it allows aerobic bacteria to grow and thrive because it has all of that surface area for it to grow on. That provides an enhanced treatment of the septic effluent, okay? Once effluent leaves the septic tank, it would go, just like it does in a typical system, to a distribution box and then a leaching facility. In this case, it's 2 leaching trenches, crushed stone leaching trenches. The microfast system has been out since about 1995. It has been approved by the DEP for general use construction. It has been approved as a denitrification system. I would add that this site is not even in a nitrogen-sensitive zone. It's not in a zone 2. But we've provided the enhanced nitrogen because of the setback to the tributary.
Where does the zone 2 start?
Zone 2s are associated with wells.
Yeah.
And we don't have a well here, we have an open surface reservoir, okay? So you don't have a Zone 2. You have what's called a Zone A.
Okay.
A Zone A is a 200-foot setback from the tributary, okay? The Zone A is not classified as a nitrogen-sensitive area. The reason being, this whole tributary, the whole reservoir, is open to the surface. You're getting a lot of air. You're getting promotion of a lot of aerobic bacteria in the system already, as opposed to with a well system where you have a Zone 2, you don't have as much air abundance in the soil that you're pumping the groundwater out of. So we're providing the denitrification system, even though it's not in a nitrogen-sensitive area. I did have a chance too, I printed out the water quality report. The water quality report for Scituate indicates that we don't even have a nitrogen problem at the reservoir. They provide their goals and they provide the amounts that were detected. For nitrogen, they have a goal, a drinking water standard of 10 parts per million is what the requirement is. We're measuring right now detected 1.29 in our reservoir, so we're not even close to the threshold. What I presented to the Water Resource Committee, and this is the town's water quality report. What I presented to the Water Resource Committee is I presented to them, and I outlined the numbers in my November correspondence to you, were the nitrogen loading calculations for the site. Nitrogen basically comes from a number of surfaces. It comes from roof surfaces. It exists in natural surfaces. It comes from fertilizer off of lawns. And it comes from septic effluent. And I ran the numbers. If this was a conventional septic system, the runoff off of the site would have a 19.1 parts per million concentration. With the denitrification fast system, the runoff from the site is 9.8 parts per million. It meets the drinking water standard at the site. And the site is more than 1,000 feet away from the actual reservoir. So you're even going to get more treatment by the time it gets to the reservoir.
And is there any nitrogen without any system?
Yes.
Coming, what's the natural, even a guess?
I wouldn't even,
Okay.
I couldn't even guess on it.
Then if this isn't a nitrogen-sensitive area, why would you put a nitrogen system in?
It's because it's providing just that much more enhanced treatment for a variance that we're selecting. You know, everyone's sensitive of the water supply.
It's insurance.
It's insurance.
Can I ask, so I've heard in both of these meetings that there would be further reduction in nitrogen from the site to the reservoir. How do you determine that, given that some of the inputs between this property and the reservoir could use fertilizers and all of those things? You know, is it really a fair assessment to say that it would be, and I'm going to use the word diluted, further diluted between the properties? Or is it more fair to say that this property would not be contributing?
Sure, the concentration would be further diluted.
Assuming that there are no significant inputs further downstream, to which, you know, this property would not be responsible for.
Right.
But
Whatever inputs exist today downstream would exist when this house gets built.
so I guess I'm just not, I guess I'm saying it's probably not a fair statement to say that it would be further reduced with certainty between this property and the reservoir, but this property would not be contributing anything.
Well, it meets
beyond.
the less than 10 parts per million.
Right. I guess it's a small point, but, you know, I've heard it twice that, you know, the nitrogen load may be further decreased.
Nobody knows,
across-
unless somebody
right,
digs up the path that it
exactly.
gets to the reservoir, nobody's gonna.
Right, if we don't,
And that's
collect
not-
samples, you know, of the surface water between the two locations,
You
we
just- yeah.
have to be careful of that.
Right.
But point well taken that this concentration is below the current drinking water requirement.
Yes, it is. And so a lot of, you know, getting back to the two separate issues here, you know, We did a lot of talk about the 150-foot buffer as opposed to, they really didn't ask much about the nitrogen calculations. They didn't ask about the quality of the effluent leaving the site at the Water Resource Committee meeting.
Will you explain something to me? It says that you explain the process of semi-annual inspections and notifications to us. Elaborate a little more.
The Water Resource Committee said, how do we know that the fast system is going to be maintained and taken care of? We explained that there would be deed restrictions placed on the property, that a wastewater treatment operator would be required to make semi-annual inspections of the property. Those inspections get filed with the Board of Health. They were unaware of that process.
Right.
And they also asked,
But that's almost unenforceable, isn't it?
well, they asked, they further asked, actually directly to me, so what happens, how do we know that those things are really happening?
Right.
And I explained to them that I do get letters from the contract holder if somebody fails to renew their contract. So I get those notifications, and then I send a letter out to the property owner saying, it's come to our attention that you no longer have the requirements associated with an operations and maintenance contract. That is a condition of your permit and your ability to have your septic system. Therefore, you need to reinstate a contract with one licensed company or another.
And the realtor explains this to the future homeowner.
Yes. Yeah, it's just.
Well, we had,
it's just curious.
we had these same issues with the Montessori property there. The monitoring of it, that was very strict.
Right.
And reports had to get filed and.
Okay.
So we actually did discuss, what is the level of discussion and notification from an existing property owner to a new property owner. And actually the applicant explained herself that, it is a requirement of the realtor's license to make that information known at the time of closing and in preparation for closing. Am I speaking correctly for you?
Actually, before closing.
Before closing, okay.
You have to let them know it's a violation of code of ethics. It's like we'd be lying if we didn't disclose what we know.
Right.
And I've sold houses with, special systems, and we say it, and you have small little buyers, but they know the rules are up front.
Would that be part of the deed restriction as well?
It is.
Okay,
Yeah, it
and
is.
so that would be a title search, and, that would be, the lawyers would clear in on that.
Right.
Actually, even the title company, right?
Mhm.
Title insurance.
Yeah.
And then any property conveyance, would pop up obviously on the title. It would also pop up during any Title V inspections. That would be done with the sale of the property, are required to have copies of the O&M contract attached to them.
And then we did actually kind of further discuss, whether property owners really understand what they're getting. And a lot of the property owners that we have to call about this maintenance issue are those that say, oh, we didn't understand what our system was. So there is certainly a level of understanding. Notification is one thing, but understanding is another. So yes, folks are notified when they purchase a property that this is what you need to do, but it's also in, a packet this big. So, it's part of our responsibility when we get those letters is to say, this is what you should have, this is what you don't have. We tend to have to explain what's involved in their system and what the maintenance contract is, whether it's a refresher or whether we're explaining it to them in detail for the first time. But typically, in the few instances that I've had, it's been more of an education process. So as soon as we tell the new property owner what they need to do, they do it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any questions from name and address, please, for the record?
Steve Bjorklund, 15 Captain Daniel Litchfield Lane. I just want to make a couple of comments if I can. Greg covered the system quite well. I think everybody understands the system. I've actually owned and maintained a fast system in the town of Scituate on Lawson Road since pretty much the inception of the fast system. And I think I had one service call where a blower went and the alarm went off and I had it changed. by the contractor immediately. The system has worked tremendously since the day it went in, as far as the operation of the system and the quality of the water that's going into the groundwater at that particular site. I'm sure that if they've made any improvements in the system now, this one will be better, I guess, but the one I had was one of the first, and it's worked really well. I know the reports that go into the Board of Health are always, the clarity of the water and all that, they're always really good. So I'm surprised they work as good as they do as far as the fast system. And I didn't realize this was a fast system. But I want to try and comment, if I can, the tributary is really the issue, I mean, here. And Russell, I know you made a lot of comments regarding the timing for the Bongazone family, and they did the subdivision in 55, how come this lot wasn't done? They came out with a water resource district, it still wasn't built on. There's all these changes that have happened over the last 50 or 60 years since the lot was actually created. The reality of the situation is, until this year, nobody knew that was a tributary. The stream dream team, as I call them, go out through the woods and try and determine where these tributaries are. When I originally did the Deer Common subdivision, we came in for Board of Health for approval for that system, and they actually showed a tributary going right through the middle of our subdivision, right up through the uplands, down into wetlands that were on another side of the property. Never existed. And we had to go out and prove there actually was not a tributary there. Well, in this particular case, until Dougie Sharon had more people than you could fit in this auditorium go out there to determine whether this water actually trickled in a channel that could be classified as a tributary, which is the subject of the ZBA meeting and the subject of this meeting, nobody had any idea. So as far as the Bonger zone's waiting to do something, why didn't they do anything? I don't think they could move any faster for this variance once they found out this was an issue. So I would say try not to hold that against them. I think that, if they had done this 10 years ago, there'd be a house there now. It wouldn't be an issue. If they had done this 3 years ago, this might not be an issue. If they did it last year, it might not have been an issue. And in fact, this board approved the system for that lot. It just didn't get sold because Dougie's project was happening at the same time with the same engineer, and there were just concerns on making sure that everything was done correctly. So if it really only boils down to the one variance, from the Board of Health standpoint, if the system functions properly and DEP says, we'll let you go up to 100 feet, but you got to have a good reason to do it. Well, if the lot was bigger, they'd move the system. If they could move it, they'd move it out to 150. But they are really constrained with where the system has to go in this particular location. So when they talk about the uniqueness and why this whole thing happened, the odds that these circumstances are going to happen again in front of you while there's a Board of Health in this town are extremely remote. And the tributary starts in the pipes that are under the road. I mean, I don't know how far up the road. I'm sure Greg could probably say how far those pipes go up the road. Everybody that has water in those pipes probably has septic systems that are near the pipes. And none of them have, that I know of, have fast systems along there that are going to create the same water quality or effluent quality coming out. And all of those ones are probably in worse shape, and they're probably closer than 100 feet to those pipes in the road. It's just, they just classify it as a tributary. Because we now call it a tributary, this is a huge issue. I think the zoning board will have a different take on things, but that's at the zoning board. I think from the Board of Health standpoint, you get one of the best systems that I know of that's out there, and it seems like the variances, even though it seems like 50% less because it goes from 200 to 100, if they contemplate that when they built or when they wrote Title V, they're making an assumption. There are some people that are going to have to come and ask for this particular variance. I think that's exactly what they're doing here. And like Greg said, they don't need the nitrogen removal, but they give it to you anyways, because it's just a little more. It's a little bit better system, and it cleans the water up, that much more. So I think their real fight should be at the zoning board. And, again, I've seen these systems. They work great. And personally, I don't think it's going to be a big detriment to the reservoir or the water supply. But I just caution you on those, on the dates on when this was a tributary. Don't hold that against them, because, again, it was approved. I mean, I think you sat there when it was approved. They could have built it. And if they built it and a zoning issue came up within 6 years, they got to deal with the zoning board of appeals. You know, to penalize them because they're now coming in trying to do it correctly according to every regulation that's out there, just look at it, I think, look at it with a straight eye. Do they really meet that test? I mean, is the system really going to work? And that's, I think, what the Board of Health should look at. And if the distances are, you know, if he's within 100, or if it's less than 100, the answer's no. You can't do it. DEP's not going to let you do it. But they fall in that gray area, and they're assuming you're going to make the call on, you know, is this unique enough to give them the variance? And I don't think the variance has been granted in Scituate. Ever.
I've never asked.
That I know of. I think it is a pretty unique situation. That's the definition of a variance, as far as I know.
Good point.
Well,
Very good point.
no, you know, just to piggyback those comments, maybe we should then focus on the criteria for the, you know, if the board feels, you know, they'd entertain that, we go back to those couple, we discuss those couple criteria to see if there is any,
Well, it meets Title V criteria.
for the variance.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've already, I mean, we don't have to revisit that, it's obvious, it's not
Right.
obvious, but it lends itself to that. Okay, go ahead.
I just had a question. So I know that there are certain things that pop up in the field where you have to move things a little bit. What happens if you start digging and you get to 98 feet? Is that a possibility?
There's
Or-
certainly a little bit of wiggle room where that soil absorption system is, that you could stay outside the 100 foot with it all the way around. As I said, the reserve is up to 100 feet, but the actual system is at 110.
Yeah. And if you grant the variance for a certain amount of footage, he can't go any closer than that. He's going to have to adjust it in the other direction. If you're only letting him go to 110 feet with the active system, he can't put it 109 feet. The variance will be for 110 feet.
If we did the remove and replace and found adverse soil conditions that aren't reflective of those logs there, we'd have to come back to you. That's-
If we had soil there, this wouldn't be an issue either.
So is that Michael?
Right.
If there was soil there, this wouldn't be an issue either.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? I
Yeah,
mean,
very true.
no, we sort around, when they set the criteria, that we sort around Squashkit Pond, we sort around the green bush, we did the cliffs. The cliffs wasn't anywhere near the reservoir. I mean, you know, there's been a little bit of gray area on the priority of those, of the phases.
Are there any other questions, comments?
Russell?
Yes, please.
I don't know if I'm helping or hurting, but the reason we waited so long, we knew we could have sold it much easier before. But this was our retirement, okay, part of our retirement. Doesn't mean the town should approve it because we need it, but I paid the tax bill last week. I've been paying taxes on it, you know, every year, thinking that we'll have it for our retirement when we need it. Okay, also, I believe it was 2013, the fall, I might be off a little. We had all the approvals, actually, we had 2 offers on it. I could say that I wish I sold it because it was a 4-bedroom system that cost about $8,000. This is going to be considerably more. The lot's going to be worth less with all these rules. And that's not to say if it was at the expense of the water, because I care about Scituate's water too. I've lived here all my life. If it was, I felt it was going to harm the water, well, gee, too bad. For me, in other words, I think you're right in saying, I'm sorry, but this is detrimental to the town, to the water supply. And then I just have to say, well, you know, too bad, I lost. But we didn't know. It was not a tributary. We went to conservation because they thought we said it was wetlands. We did all that. And it turned out when Doug Sharon was doing his development, that's when they changed everything. And they decided there were no, I think I'm correct, there's no wetlands no wetlands on the property. Instead, there's pipes of tributary. height, Greg?
Yes.
Okay. But that's where we're at. We were all set to go with another system. Looking back, probably from the standpoint of the water supply for Scituate, it's better things turned out that way. I know it's at our expense, but I agree it's better because we would have had a different system that probably would have been, I think that this one is the best we can do, and I think it's good enough. Again, that's not my field, but I'm explaining also why we waited. We thought
Nope, understood.
all of them was buildable. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Unless there's further comment?
Well, I mean, what's that?
Want me to do it?
Sure.
Make a motion to grant a variance to 5 Williamsburg Lane to put their septic system no less than 110 feet from the tributary.
And obviously, the deed restrictions, the maintenance, you know.
And what comes with it is the deed restriction, obviously, the deed restrictions and,
The only thing I'm going to correct, and I'm going to interrupt you.
go ahead.
On the plan, it says proposed 100-foot setback from tributary to SAS and tank, and I think that's because of the reserve, correct me if I'm wrong.
You're correct.
So I think I'd rather have that motion to what's on the plan, just so,
You'd rather have it say what?
just
No
to,
less than 100 feet.
yeah, to match it to what's on the plan, that's
Okay,
all.
yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so make a motion to grant a variance to 5 Williamsburg Lane to put their septic system no less than 100 feet from the tributary in the corner of the lot, pursuant to making sure that the inspections go along with the deed as the house is sold from owner to owner, and it's followed up on and inspected twice a year, biannually. Sound good?
Sounds good. Is there a second on that?
I will second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think the big fight is ahead of,
Yeah.
or the.
Zoning board will be another battle.
No, but that's their purview. That's,
Thank you.
Everybody be careful on that.
yeah.
It's a tough night to be out. Thank you for coming.
Well, now you get to the well regulations, right? Pardon me.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I'm not sure we should be staying, I'm not sure we should be staying too much longer. We were in trucks, I'm looking at Jim's driving.
Can I get all of your copies so that you can distribute accordingly to town hall? Thanks.
Nope. I think in hindsight, we will make it quick because it was snowing out and you have to go to Weymouth.
Yeah, 2:30.
And my concern is there for your driving. So we'll make it quick. Director's report, because I am curious to hear how the, and I don't even know if you have that in the director's report, but how the shelter went. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I do have it in, on the director's report. So since we haven't met in quite some time, I figured I would kind of give you a rundown of what we've been working on in the office and outside of the office. First of which being is, in the past, our office has been asked to support the shelter operations, whereas as of the beginning of January, we have been asked to formally run the emergency shelter if and when it opens. So what that means is that our office is responsible for coordinating, setting up, staffing, breakdown, etc. So it's a slightly different role than we've had in the past. And 2 weeks later, along comes Storm Juno, as we all know all too well. So we mobilized the shelter on a Monday evening open until the afternoon of Wednesday. We had 22 human residents, 2 dogs, and 1 bird named Sunshine. He actually was quite a nice distraction from the storm outside. From the feedback that we've been receiving, the shelter has operations were well received. We instituted a couple of changes that were very, very well received. We have a 24/7 EMT and police detail at the shelter at all times. And the nursing staff, who are all volunteers from MRC and local Scituate nurses, were really happy to know that they had the backup if and when they needed it, and there was a very serious medical emergency. So that alone has sealed some of the nurses to come back to Scituate as a first choice. If they get a call that all the towns in the South Shore are opening, they want us to call them so that they can work at our shelter, which is a great added value for us. We had a lot of people volunteer for us, so I just kind of wanted to note them for you so that you knew. Staples in Weymouth brought us several supplies. They brought us crayons for children that may be here and get a little stir crazy. They brought doodle pads. They brought bottled water, which was great for both staff that came in as well as residents who wanted water at any point in time. Selectman Mark Curran mobilized a great corps of volunteers to get seniors that came in the Council on Aging band back in their houses when the shelter closed. She had a great effort. A lot of students and a lot of families came out and helped get those folks back in their homes. There were several town hall staff that worked above and beyond, their normal hours, some of which lived at the shelter with us. Mara Glancy from RAC, Pat Gallivan, Conservation, Kim Stewart, Animal Control Officer, Laura Minier, Nancy Durfee, Kathleen McCarthy, Sean McCarthy, Kevin Kelly Facilities, Chrissy Chesney of DPW, and all of the wonderful school custodians. I can't say enough. They were at our beck and call, and they did everything and anything we asked of them at 3 in the morning. So we really had a great corps. Local nurses, the MRC volunteers came out. Certain sands were also tremendously valuable throughout the sheltering experience. So we had a lot of good resources at our disposal. As part of the entire storm process, the town is in the process of submitting paperwork to NEMA in case there is a declaration that we might be able to get some reimbursement through the town. So we, on behalf of the shelter, have submitted our expenses, and it was interesting to note that we had 300 volunteer hours over the 3 days, which was really, really impressive from town residents coming in, volunteering their time. And I kind of want to call one out in particular because I thought his story was tremendous. He believed that his family lost both of their cars and probably their house during the storm. He came in on Tuesday night. On Wednesday, when we closed the shelter, he signed himself out of the shelter and signed himself back in as a volunteer. And he said, Scituate has been very kind to me. Scituate and its people have given to me in the last 24 hours, so let me kind of pay it forward in a very small way. So I think that goes to the heart and the spirit of what this town does for each other in such situations. So I think all in all, we had a pretty successful shelter. We were fortunate that we didn't lose power in the town. So I think that kept our shelter occupant numbers down. Of course, through any experience, it's a learning experience, and we have a laundry list of things that we'd like to do better, we'd like to do differently, and we're working on getting prepared to implement those, hopefully not this weekend, but getting ready to implement those when we need to in the future. So that's the summary of the shelter, unless you have any specific questions about it.
I don't think so.
Pretty good job.
Yeah, very good.
Very good.
So just kind of other business that we've been working on, there's one known failed septic system, and I'm actively engaged with the property owner to have that pumped regularly and maintained until it can be repaired come better weather. So I am in communication with the property owner. Conservation Commission is also keeping tabs on what I'm doing because the effluent is discharging to a storm drain, which goes to a wetland across the street.
What neighborhood? What
Greenfield
house?
Lane?
It's on Greenfield Lane.
Greenfield Lane, yeah.
Yeah. Over the holiday season, we worked with the Scituate Tax Coalition and the Scituate Police Department and John Roser of Scituate Community TV to release PSA about opiate use resources and offering those resources and reminders to be safe during the holiday season with regard to opiate use. We have 2 active housing complaints that we are working on pretty diligently, one of which will likely wind up as a court case. So we are working with counsel on that, and we'll likely work with counsel on the second one.
Housing
Moving forward.
complaints, is that boarding issue, or is this a?
Tenant.
Landlord
Landlord tenant.
occupant is one, and actually both. Both are perceived landlord occupant issues. We, through the permitting process, Sue Tice has done a tremendous job kind of at the end of the year getting our food establishment permit process in order. We have implemented a new tracking system, and through that tracking system, we are documenting and keeping record of ServSafe certification compliance, choke safe training compliance, and FOG regulation compliance. We have worked through this, and allergen awareness. So we have worked through the ServSafe compliance, and everyone is in compliance at this point except one, which we're waiting on an update from. We have complete compliance with allergen at this point, which is great. Everybody's up to date. And we noticed through the permitting process that several establishments that have 25 or more seats are not in compliance with choke safe training. So we are working with Mark Donovan of the Scituate Fire Department and Jamie, the owner of Puppet Widows Walk, to offer a training to those personnel of the establishments to offer that training on February 25th at 9 a.m. So if they can send their staff to that training, they become immediately back in compliance. If they don't, they're required to find their own source of training and to get in compliance immediately, because obviously, not having the appropriate training in place jeopardizes the permit to operate. And then after we get through that, we're moving on to the current round of establishments that need to meet the FOB requirements based on square footage and number of seats. So we're working through one issue at a time with each establishment owner. A quick note: we've been working on well regs for quite a while, and we got a call sometime in January from a well driller who is planning to install a geothermal well in Scituate. Obviously, the well regulations we're working on don't impact geothermal well installation. So I just kind of wanted to bring it to your attention that there will be the potential for additional types of wells being drilled. Do you remember what the address was? I didn't have time to look it up today.
No, it's been a while.
Sue has it written down so that we can keep tabs on it. The well driller was specifically calling to ask what he needed to do if this project went forward. And we told him, notify us when the project is going to begin. So we kept a record of his name and phone number. I think he was from New Hampshire, if I'm not mistaken. And then let us know when the project was going to start, provide us copies of the well logs, and kind of keep us abreast during the process. So.
Now, we don't address geothermal in, nothing. Does the state address anything with geothermal wells?
We haven't, we haven't addressed it at all, and quite honestly, I haven't looked yet to see if the state has addressed it.
Well, the question is when, a geothermal well is if you are drawing potable water, then that proportion of it falls under.
Us.
Oh, without a question.
No, but that falls under the potable regulations,
Yeah.
But I think some of the geothermal
The
wells.
geothermal is really just the way,
Yeah,
just
heating and cooling.
the process.
Right.
Right.
Right, heating and cooling, right. They're very expensive.
For heat.
systems. Very,
Yeah, for
very-
heating.
very
It's nothing to
Yeah,
do
they're
with
for, yeah, I
drinking
think
or
so, they're
irrigation.
for heating,
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
So I didn't really think
Yeah.
that it came under our purview, but I wanted to bring it up in
Yeah.
case you wanted us to look into it at all.
Yeah.
It almost, I don't really know anything about geothermal wells, except for the fact that you're taking a little heat from the earth, so you're not heating colder water, but there'd almost have to be some sort of a black backflow preventive. I don't know if a system like that has an antifreeze in it. I mean, I have no idea.
You know what, well, I think what it is.
You know, if it came back down, now you're polluting your water table. Check valve, yeah, backflow.
If you go you go deep enough, it's 68 degrees and you suck it up, and with a little bit of electricity, you heat it for
Right.
heat, or cool it for AC. So you don't need gas or fuel, or oil, or you don't need a furnace. I mean, you do. But right, besides that, I mean, but my point was, unless it's factored into the potable, unless they're at all trying to draw potable out of it, which they're probably not, is it even under our?
A health issue, that's right. Is it a building inspector? Is it a water resource? I mean, you are tapping into potentially water supply. I don't know. It's an interesting point. It might fall out of our privy, though. You're very well right. If it's not portable or irrigation, it's in a heating system, but there still should be something there, because
Somebody
You could pollute
needs to
it by a
be aware.
backwards way.
If it's not us, somebody needs to be aware of these, documenting these, recording the presence of these. If it's not
The
us.
DEP might have some information.
yeah, it's interesting. It's, very well might not fall in our privy.
So we can, do some research and see,
But it should be part of that database that if you're not on the town water, why? And do you have I guess they still would be on the town water. Yeah, I don't know if that's, we'll have to think, we'll have to ask around about that.
I figured to throw it out there since we did get an inquiry and we're at the stage where we can
Yeah, it might
address
be a
if we
simple
need
thing to
or-
say, let us know that you're doing a well, and that way we have a record, it's geothermal. But now it's a new definition, it's a third one,
Right.
irrigation, potable, and geothermal.
So I figured I'd throw that out there, kind of let
Glad
guys
you
think
did.
about it, and, we can revisit it as we
Yeah.
go along.
Glad you did, thank you.
Sue has, so as our department is in charge of implementing an emergency preparedness grant, and we are part of a region that spans basically the 128 belt, that's called Region 4B. And as part of that, we are putting together a binder for preparation for a public health emergency associated with all hazards. So it deals with biological, chemical, radiological, etc. And one of the things that we need to update is what are the resources in Scituate that we can go to during any of these types of hazards. So Sue has been working closely with our consultants to update schools, town buildings, funeral homes. Help me.
That was an interesting.
Veterinarians, pharmacies, folks that might need to help us during an emergency. So that we have, so that we have all of those things that are ready at, a flip of a page.
Yeah, right. So you don't have to look it up, it's there for you.
Right, if we learn for some reason, that the measles outbreak is in
Right.
Massachusetts, and a huge number of Scituate residents are vaccinated and need to be vaccinated immediately. If that turns into something we have to do right now, this puts, this gives us our resources. So it's something that we've been doing as part of this grant year, and we've been pretty active on it for the last couple of months.
Oh, good. And so once you get a major framework done, then it's once a year, you gotta tweak it and make
Yep.
sure
Much easier.
this
Yep,
person's
much
still
easier.
in business, or they still live here, or,
It hasn't been done since 2008, so it's pretty,
So it's
Yeah, we're
pretty
7 years
essential.
out.
pretty
that's-
useless
yeah.
at this point, the one we have. Everything's changed, so.
The other thing that we've been working to do is to become kind of a more of a resource.
Yeah.
Can somebody come to the Board of Health and get information on a particular issue, such as Lyme disease, emergency preparedness, flu, Ebola. Yes, Ebola. How can I forget Ebola? So we've been given the okay to, just outside our office, put, I'll call it like a shoe cubby. You know how you have those little pieces of furniture and you have little slips for things. So Sue has been helping me gather resources from DPH and other, trusted sources so that we can provide, whether it be seasonally changed or like tick information and Lyme disease information. Whether it's seasonal or all year round, we'll be able to have a constant supply where people can pick up this information for free and they can use, these resources all year round. So we're trying to, be a good resource of information on health-related issues, whether,
And that's good, like you said, in a little cubby box, and that's something that could be put outside the office.
Yep, right outside our door so people can come.
If someone's waiting, they can do a little reading, and
Right.
maybe they see something they might want
It's
to
like
take
a
it home.
doctor's office.
Exactly.
STD information.
And then, I just kind of wanted
That's
to.
short for standard, right?
Yeah, that's correct. The camera.
And just kind of a reminder that, it is the middle of flu season. Flu is widespread in Massachusetts right now. Peak is typically February, so we're in the midst of peak season. A lot of people are shut in their houses, spreading germs around. And the season in Massachusetts typically goes until April.
We're
So
in peak snow season, too.
we are in peak snow season. We are.
Just in case you didn't notice.
Yeah, I missed that one.
Thanks, Steve.
So basically, it's just kind of a mention that, for folks who think it's too late to get a flu shot, it's not too late to get a flu shot. There's at least
Didn't the
2
CDC
months.
say that, there's strains that are out there, this flu shot is...
The flu shot is less effective than in past years. The strain that is most prevalent this year is a very virulent strain. However, getting a flu shot does provide some immunity and can lessen the effects even if that strain is not included. So it is still a good option. If people just feel that it's too late, it's not too late if they want to get one. And then finally, I have provided you copies with our annual report, which 3 of you submit to the town. This was actually due during the blizzard, so we were granted an extension. But that extension is coming to a close, so I present it to you for review, and if you could let me know if you have any changes. I realize it was short notice, but I would love to be able to submit it to Sheila Manning tomorrow.
Yeah, it's very well.
Steve, you said you noticed a couple things.
They did, yeah.
That's a good question.
I think I know the first one you were talking.
Campylobacter. What would that be?
Gosh, we were just talking.
We
about
were
that
just
this
talking,
morning.
it's,
Yeah, Google knows all. I should know.
didn't Eileen say today that
It's relatively common, she said.
yeah.
And I can't describe its symptoms.
I can't remember seeing it before. And Guardia
It has-
Guardia's from drinking bad water? Is that
First
called
line,
camping?
Yeah,
second
camping.
paragraph. We meet publicly every other week to address concerns.
Right, that was one of the ones I caught.
Yeah,
And I
so we
wasn't
have,
sure.
so there is, so Campylobacter, I believe there was 1 case reported last year, and I guess it's, I could be speaking out of turn because I'm not Eileen, but I believe you identify it through a stool sample.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a stool sample taken and you have certain symptoms, you're not gonna catch it. So these are, I guess it's somewhat common. It's just a matter of whether it's reported or not. So we just have a few more
She
cases
said it's like
reported.
a parasite or a food contamination kind of thing. Sounds pretty
I
common.
bet you that number of Lyme disease is way higher than that. It's just people didn't.
Right, these are the numbers of cases reported
Reported,
to
right.
Eileen, in the Board of Health
Right.
office, and, to which she follows up on.
Now, who reports the stuff? Is it the hospital or the doctors? I mean,
The treating hospital and sometimes.
so they know patient Smith, so to say, came in and they live in Scituate, so at some point they report back to Scituate
Yeah.
of all their patients just from Scituate, without a name, it doesn't matter. They
Right.
don't need a name, it's
Right.
just the,
Yep, that and the, when the state is notified by the reporting doctor, the state would notify Eileen, and she can follow up on a local level to make sure folks are getting the proper treatment and, are being seen as appropriate.
right. Or to see if there's any outbreaks in a certain area and
Right.
why.
Yep, and to track them.
And
Yep.
track them, sure. Sure, and that's, all right. Thank you for your report. Very thorough, as always. You've been working hard. You prove it every time we meet, so doing a good job, thank you. Well regulations, as I said before, the snow is starting to fall. I want to get you home, and I think we all want to get home. You've done a little more work on them?
I have, so the water quality piece, I have several specific items in that, and then instead of trying to develop our own list and grapple with what we think should be included, I have put in a broad statement that says water quality parameters should include those that are listed in tables, I think they're 8, 9, and 10 of the state private well guidelines, and that as those are updated, that should be the resource. But I'm attaching those to our regulations for convenience. So basically, we would be providing the list as given by DEP when we promulgate our regs, but it is the applicant's responsibility to check the current version when they apply. So that we say, you must be consistent with what DEP wants. That's kind of my thought to make it simple. It is
Yeah.
consistent with some other
And that
towns.
keeps us from trying to constantly update, some numbers that we may not even be privy to or on top of
Right.
that we don't.
Because every time Massachusetts would update their drinking water regulations, we would then have to go back in and update our regs. So I thought if we be consistent with what the state indicates, they can easily find those resources. So that was kind of my thought for you to ponder and see next time.
Okay. Yeah, and do the best you can, because it's been winter and you've been running shelters and septic inspections and...
It's in the EOs, there's just a couple, but I just want them to get paid.
So I guess I'll let you say
Yeah.
administrative items?
Yeah, there you go. Send them on down.
All right.
And then, thank you.
And then while you look at those, I think it was one of the November or December meetings, you folks had asked for, let me get this.
Some light reading material.
Right, you had asked for copies of the regulations that we are bound to enforce. So, here are your packets.
I think it was you, Steve, that said that.
So that would be zoning stuff
Yeah.
and town bylaws and...
Yep, so there's a summary sheet on the top. I'm kind of taking out your lane-related materials. There is a summary sheet on the top, and so that's your pile, that tells you all the regulations that are included in this packet.
You guys have been busy.
You have no idea.
All the paper.
You have no idea.
Wow.
We never stop.
All right, there's the rest of those.
The dates are really quickly though.
And I just lost
Your,
the rubber band, so I apologize. This one is not from Ken.
Damn.
Sorry.
Light reading material.
And then,
So these are yours.
thank you very much.
and this is the last copy.
That's what it's...
Thanks.
Michael,
Oh, thank you.
bathroom material.
Title V.
So they are both local and state regulations.
Wow, okay.
Good to know.
Hopefully there's nothing added in there. There might be some old meeting agenda's squished in the middle of those, but
Because we kept thinking we were meeting.
so if there's any that you see on here that you went, oh, wait a minute, we actually have these too, let us know and we'll print copies. We have a big picture goal of making sure that all of these are available on our website too. So at some point, hopefully in the next month or two, we'll start uploading and updating our website so that we are more current than we have been.
I've been taking some training classes on the website to learn how.
Good.
It's not really that big of a deal.
So you can hack into Sony.
Hopefully not.
This is great. Any questions come up, then we should have the information to study at home and put a finger on it very quickly.
Yeah, so hopefully it'll make it easier for you guys to prepare.
Yeah, no, this will find a special spot on my file cabinet on the top. That perfect. Anything else?
No.
We're good. All right.
I'm good.
Guys,
Make a
good.
mo-
Good, good.
We'll adjourn.
Favor? Aye.
Adjourned.